Greetings, humans. Welcome to Lead Human. I'm Tim Spengler, along with my co-host, the prolific author and futurist, Mr. Jack Myers. And together each week in about 30 minutes or so, we aim to prove that despite all of the emphasis and interest in data and dashboards and AI, that the real competitive advantage in business today is less about managing the machine and more about unleashing the human potential. Jack, hello.
Hello, Tim.
How you doing?
There's a lot we could be talking about this week, and we're going to be introducing and welcoming this week's guest, Marc DeBevoise. But how can we not talk about the Knicks?
Hey, babe.
You're a
Tonight
big fan. I can see the sign behind you.
Yep. I was at one of the playoff games. They gave out towels. As this drops, which is Wednesday, Game 1 of the NBA Finals.
You know, I have to say I have very mixed feelings. I'm going to root for the Knicks, no question about it.
Good.
But my mom lived in San Antonio for 50 years and was a huge Spurs fan. And so, there's a little bit of mixed feelings. I think I should do her honor by giving the Spurs some. Jim Dolan has been like a thorn in my side for many years, and nothing he's really done to me individually. But he's the most disliked owner, I think, in all of sports. And the question I'm asking, I just published a piece to my Substack, is this his reformation? Is this his return? If the Knicks win and they have a caravan down the what's it called? The Canyon of Heroes on Wall Street. Will he be cheered or will he be booed? Will he even be there? And, I got to know early in my career his dad, Chuck Dolan, who founded Cablevision and was a wonderful, wonderful man. So, and I always kind of looked at Jim Dolan as kind of a Nepo babe,
Yes, Evan. Yes, Mr. Shapiro.
Exactly. Did he really earn, where he is today? And I've had huge resentment, as many New York Yankee fans have, that Yankee Stadium's not on the west side of Manhattan instead of the Hudson Yards, because he single-handedly, because he had land rights because of Madison Square Garden. He owns MSG Entertainment, Sphere Entertainment, which I give him a lot of credit for.
Huge win there.
Theater, Radio City Music Hall. He's certainly had his success. AMC Networks, of course, which I think is up for sale. So he's kind of on a roll. And this would kind of be the culmination of a kind of how you got to look at him as having done this on his own and give him credit. And I think that Knicks win, which I think and hope's going to happen, what do you think, Tim? Do you think that's his return to acceptance?
Well, I think in the parade, if there is one, when there is one, he should definitely be on the float and he should definitely be cheered. He hired the right general manager and let the guy cook, as they say. He let him cook. Leon Rose has done unbelievable things, 5 or 6 moves. I mean, most people don't know that Leon Rose was originally Jalen Brunson's father, Rick Brunson's agent. Leon Rose is an agent. And there's a little bit of precedent now. Bob Myers, Rob Pelinka, some very successful agents who became general managers. Leon Rose is one of those. He's made some unbelievable moves. And Jim Dolan hired the right general manager. And from what we can see, we only know what we can see. Where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Where there's smoke, there's fire. And we read a lot of journalists who are covering it for a living. So we could talk about the Carmelo Anthony trade. There's many meddling rumors. And then we can juxtapose that to Mr. Jerry Jones, who owns the Dallas Cowboys. Good on him. Let's be president and let's be general manager as well. Come on.
Do you think that the reason that he's not meddling and that he's been so involved in building the Sphere and launching that and now expanding it globally, that he wasn't paying as much attention?
No, I don't. It's a premise. I think he just made the right move by letting Leon Rose do what he was supposed to do.
So you're giving credit where credit's due.
For that, yes, for that. And we talk about in leadership, sometimes it's about bringing on the right people who have the subject matter expertise, because you can't be an expert in everything. Jerry Jones does not know as much about football as Jimmy Johnson. Shocker. But he kicked him out.
Yeah.
Jimmy Johnson wanted to make the decisions in football.
Great documentary, by the way. I think it's Netflix on. It's like it's a multi-part documentary series about Jerry Jones.
Yeah. So I think hiring the right person, getting out of the way. Thank you very much, and an incredible job by them. And the Knicks players, I will say, have been very generous in mentioning. They call him Mr. Dolan. Mentioning, you and I know him as Jim Dolan as in the media world, but as mentioning Mr. Dolan, in the last couple weeks. So good there. And I guess that sounds like another good sign. And the Sphere is a real interesting play, a gamble, an expensive one at that. That seems to be really, shall I say, becoming a new way to think about live entertainment. Right.
So before we introduce Mark to join us, I'll just put in a little gratuitous self-promotion to go to the MyersReport.substack.com to read my longer form commentary on Jim Dolan and some of my observations. And should we introduce
Sorry, Jack.
Mark?
Interesting character.
Yeah, to say the least. And I do think it's an interesting time. And it's what a great time for New York sports fans. And the Yankees are doing pretty well also. So no complaints there.
Want to talk about our guest today?
Sure. So Marc DeBevoise is really an interesting guy. And what's most interesting is how accessible, approachable, and human he is. He's had an extraordinary career. He and I originally met when he was at CBS Interactive, where he was for many years, leading CBS Viacom through the early internet boom into the digital age, and then moving on into the streaming world at Brightcove. And today at a really, really interesting company, I think, called OverDrive. And OverDrive is a mission-led company that's focused on globally 115 countries, focused on literacy and reading by providing digitally books, magazines, audio, and streaming, and making it available. So my books, if they get international distribution and availability, it's heavily through OverDrive. And it's one of the most important companies in the publishing industry today in terms of creating readership, especially in countries where other forms and formats are not all that available or too costly. So I'm really excited to bring him in. I think he's really, his focus is always on the human-led context of technology, which is, of course, where we live, Tim.
Yeah, true. And this is technology for good, as you say, because I think, with all of the growth on the planet, or not all, I shouldn't say all, but much of the growth on this planet is going to be in the continent of Africa in the next 20 years. And the ability of technology to actually be able to educate folks is going to be the way. And so that's great. And I'm glad someone like Mark, who is in a global job, so his outreach, as you said, 115 countries, his outreach is going to be key here. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. Why don't we bring him on? Mark, welcome to Lead Human.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you again.
You too, Jack. It's great to be here.
Let's jump right in. Tell us about your leadership style. What do you value in great leaders? And tell us about you as a leader.
Oh, thanks for that question. I like to refer to my style as empathetic accountability. And then a lot of people will be like, what the heck is that? And I say, do you have a grandparent? Are you Jewish or are you Catholic? Do you have a Jewish or a Catholic grandmother? Like, it's that, right? It's that, that belief that you don't want to disappoint them. And if you disappoint them, they're going to express that disappointment to you. And they're going to support you in all the things that you want to do, or at least the things they think are the right things that you should be doing. And they're going to try to build you up in going after your dreams, right? And going after those unique opportunities. And I seek to be that type of leader. It's not always that way, right? But I do find that, it's not about yelling and screaming and not about demanding. It's being really clear on what the goals are and really clear on what we're trying to do together, giving people their runway and making sure you hire the right people for the right things. And that's really the simplicity of it.
So those two words, empathetic, accountability. Do you finish your emails with those? Did you have that on the wall or on the hats?
I try not to.
How do you brand that?
I try not to, because I try to be a really down-to-earth manager, and I like down-to-earth managers, people who will roll up their sleeves and get in there. I don't believe in a lot of layers and layers of complexity or words in that way. Like, I prefer goals that are, 3 bullets of yes and 3 bullets of what not to do, and keeping them short. Those sort of famous no more than 6 things per page kind of rules. And so I try not to be too expressive about that, except for the first time I meet a new employee or leadership team and sort of say, this is how I approach things. You'll feel that in the day-to-day. Great. Let's get to work. What's up next? And try to get down to what we need to do. Although I'm a big believer in planning and goal setting, right? So that, I've run into a lot of companies that I've helped that didn't have that type of stringent planning process where you do a 3-year plan every year. And it's a lot easier the second year because you're just editing the first year's plan. But it's something I learned early in my career. I was at NBC when it was part of GE. And when we bought Universal, I was on the team that helped do that deal.
Little 5 Sigma in there.
Yeah, 6
Sigma.
Yeah. 5 would be like
5
failing.
Of the 6. I could never get that 5th one.
No, but we had these famous processes. We were called S1 and S3. And S1 is your budget and S3 is your 3-year plan. You do it every year, right? And that really stuck with me over the course of my career, is like being a great way to make sure everybody's aligned, and everybody's aligned on what not to do, because you know where you're headed over that multi-year period. And I find that to be very effective.
Ever presented Jack Welch?
I did not. It was the Bob Wright days, and we didn't get all the way up the chain there at GE, but got to Bob Wright.
So you think about that 3-year plan and you think long term, but you do have, especially in public companies, fiduciary responsibility and this quarterly myopia that drives people to focus on the quarter as opposed to the long term. How do you balance that? I think you were just describing in some ways, but when you really have teams that are demanding immediate performance, how do you bring that empathetic part of the leadership to the table?
Yeah, look, I think it's really about that goal setting and making sure you do set it, that it also includes the near-term goals that you need to go after. It's not just, hey, let's go after pie in the sky 3 years. Now, do I think every business should be run quarterly? I think that's the flaw in the system. It's not that public companies have to report quarterly. It's that every business is not a quarterly business, right? We all have worked in ad sales. Yeah, it's quarterly. We know which ones are the strong ones and which ones are the weak ones in each business and why, right? There's summer and how much that impacts things. If you take a theme park business like at Universal or at Disney, right? You know where the highs and the troughs are based on both weather and travel. And like the same thing works in the business I'm in today, which is in public libraries and in publishing and content. They have annual budget cycles, right? Not necessarily quarterly budget cycles. So the key is just being really clear on those goals. That's why I say sort of accountability doesn't just go down. Accountability goes up, right? That management has to understand that you need to set those goals realistically, right? That whether they're quarterly or annual in those areas. So I think it's all workable, but it's all about how transparent you are in the sharing.
And we'll come back to OverDrive and what you're doing now. Yeah. But as you go back, you were very early into digital.
Yes.
At NBC, CBS Interactive, you were there in the earliest days of digital. Where are the parallels today with AI to what you saw then, and what are the differences?
Yeah, I was lucky. I came out of undergrad in 98. So it was like peak internet pandemonium. And I was an investment banking analyst for a firm called Hamberton Quist, which no one remembers anymore because it was bought by Chase and then merged with JP Morgan and became part of that behemoth while I was there. But we were a San Francisco-based investment bank doing all internet deals. And it was crazy, right? I mean, I literally probably did what an average banker does in 5 years in 2, right? Because it was just so hectic. And then it all died, right? The crash.
What ones did you work on that were either winners or losers?
I worked on MicroStrategy, which is now Strategy, which I worked on their follow-on offerings, ones that died, like Cosmo.com. Remember those? The delivery services. So some really interesting early ideas. CareerBuilder, which really was monster before monster, right? And so there's some really like wonderful companies that came out of that. But what I take away is like that explosion is where I feel like we are now in AI, right? It's just I don't want to say it's mania, but it's a lot of activity. And so the lesson I take from that is it will calm down and become something of pace, right? And if you think about the internet's transformation of the last 25 years, effectively since then, it has been tremendous and wildly impactful to our lives. But I also go, look, it's very much contained in the digital world, right? So I've heard, these theses from other really strong academic folks is like, the physical world hasn't changed that much since the 70s. You're still flying in the same type of airplane. You're still cooking with the same type of tools. Like all these physical things we do have remained that way. And AI, it looks like it's going to certainly change the digital world that we operate in. The question, and I think the most unique part is, can it also help change the physical world in some meaningful ways? This is Elon with robots, or how you're, how we're going to execute those. And I don't have, I'm not a researcher. I don't sit in that area, but I am intrigued by how that will change things. And I do think we need to be prepared that this is a 20-year run that may be compressed by the nature of the technology. Maybe it's a 10-year change, but it's going to be very, very impactful, just like the internet was. And I do think it's going to be that type of transformative technology.
You think only 10 years?
I don't know.
Or
I just
because
feel,
some people say 24 months, and there's radical.
Yeah, that
shift.
part I don't.
Sam
know.
Altman and Dario Amodei are
they have
a different place.
I don't normally take my financial advice from Ben Affleck, but I think his take on AI from a few months ago was really interesting.
He had a good exit there.
Yeah, he's done well.
Yeah, he did well.
But his comment I really buy into, which was effectively that like, these guys are financially incented to tell you that the world's going to change phenomenally fast to raise capital. And they may earnestly believe it. So I'm not claiming that they're lying in some way. But my belief is that I think that change takes longer and is longer lasting than you think. And I go back to our world of, sort of how streaming came about, right? If you think about, our team launched CBS All Access in 2014. And we were, Netflix was 2010 when it really went digital. Hulu was 2012. We were sort of like first, straight to market broadcaster. We're still talking about the same business model here about 14 years later, like 12 and 14 years later. You're sort of saying like, it's quick change that then has a long arc. Right. And so I think that's where I lean towards on AI. It's like quick change that you see is impacting us, and it's going to be a long arc of how it impacts us. And I don't think sort of fundamentally changes every job and the nature of it in 24 months. Although mine has been impacted pretty, it's really interesting, the way it's helping us and helping us do things.
So you run this company, you've worked at other big companies leading the digital charge, definitely on the cutting edge. And you also now advise a lot of startups.
I have, yes.
My question is about timing. So I would say the leader of the media agency business, Mr. Erwin Gottlieb, really smart guy. I remember I went to talk to him once about a startup I was going to become CEO of. It was CAA backed. It was very sexy for all these reasons. And he said to me, if you're wrong on timing, if you're too early, you're wrong, was his line. If you're too early, you're wrong. We were too early and it was wrong. How do you, from all your experience, how do you judge companies from a timing standpoint where people can learn as they're thinking about going to something that's bleeding edge, they're thinking about starting something that might be bleeding edge? Is there any wisdom you can give us on this thing about timing?
Only that, it's hard to be right. I have a lot of wrongs
Thanks,
in there.
Mark.
A lot of wrongs in there too, right? Like every once in a while they're right. But look, I always believe in if you use logic, use your plan, and if you think it's right, go. And I know that sounds like, throw caution to the wind, but sometimes it's about taking risk, right? And that's why frankly, I'm not a great entrepreneur. I'm not a great starter of companies. I have not done that in my career. I have always gone to established companies and help them start things internally.
I see.
Or help them grow. Now I have advised and helped and invested in other companies, and my brother and my uncle are both wildly successful entrepreneurs, and so the somewhere in the blood it's there, but it's not with me, right? It skipped a generation, so to speak. But yeah, my sense is you got to try, right? And I keep a map on my wall of mid 1600s Manhattan. My family name DeBevoise is actually a French Huguenot name. We are early Dutch settlers of Manhattan Island, back to the 1640s.
The originals.
And why I keep that on my wall is to remind myself to be a little less conservative sometimes and be a little more risk-taking. These are people that got on a boat for 3 months and threw their life into this one venture, and whether it was tulips or beaver or whatever they were going to come and trade, they were going to come do something. And that is a wild risk. And I find like that reminder of like, you just sometimes have to say, let's try. And so that's what I'd say on timing. It's like, give it a try. And look, I mean, I take some of the things we've started. I go back to that Paramount Plus, CBS All Access story. And that was... Honestly, we had the idea in 2012. It took us 2 years to convince the rest of the company to really do it. Really a year, and then a year of building it and being ready to execute. But, that was a worthwhile risk, and we convinced some really incredible people to take that risk with us, and it was awesome.
You mentioned tulips. I'm sorry, I just have to go there to the tulip bubble. The tulip bubble. The tulip. That's kind of the same thing today with AI bubble that we're concerned about.
What's the tulip bubble?
Yeah, I mean, famously, there was this huge, like, where we're going to run out of tulips and, a whole thing back in the day when they came here. And so they were looking for new ground and new places to go. But do I think AI is a bubble? I don't know. I mean, was internet a bubble in 99 to 2001? Sure. Like some companies went away, but the ones that lasted, Google, like pretty.
Tulips were once the internet.
Yes.
And
that was innovation.
That was...
Then it was
the cost of bubbles of tulips just went up. We'll maybe edit that out, but I couldn't resist.
Oysters were next, by the way, in New York, right? They were a huge.
There you go.
They were the poor people's food, and then they became the rich people's food because they started to run out. So you never know.
So you were at Brightcove. It was a turnaround.
Yeah.
You had a successful exit. During the turnaround phase, how did you motivate your teams? What were the core principles that you followed?
Yeah. I was lucky to have put together a mixed team of existing executives and team members that were at Brightcove for either a very long or medium long period of time. And then I brought some new blood into the company, including a head of product and a head of strategy, a few people that really were great motivators alongside me. And I think that matters a lot. And really what we believed in was what we were delivering for our customers was super valuable, right? And that helps so much. When you really believe in the product and what you're delivering in the software side, then you can really get behind getting people to make change, to make it better for those customers. So we leaned very much into that. I used, one of our bigger issues was getting our sales culture to be really what I would call engaged, right? And really active. And so I stole from the best TV show of that year, which was The Bear, and I stole Every Second Counts. And I was like, we need urgency. That's the Thomas Keller kitchen, which is French Laundry and Per Se. But by the way, I've been in the kitchen in Per Se, and he has on the wall sense of urgency under a clock, right under the wall. And if you know The Bear, it's Every Second Counts under a clock. So they stole, they tweaked it. So I thought
you were going to say Ted Lasso Belief.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the one I thought you were going to say when you said TV show.
I mean, we're still selling software, so it's hard to fundamentally be like, you should believe, but the answer we could say was like, let's be urgent in the things we do. And it's okay if we make mistakes as long as we learn from them, but let's run harder and let's see what that performance looks like. And we fundamentally did get better, right? And we did get the company to, stop shrinking and start growing again, although mildly. And we did bring profitability back to the company, and then ultimately, sold the company successfully at the beginning of 2022. I'm sorry, at the beginning of 2022. My belief was that we needed to get people to believe, not necessarily the Ted Lasso piece, that if we worked more urgently towards the goals, that good things would happen. And that was true. And I think that's really true in most sales cultures, right? That if you can get people to just be engaged and really active, good things will happen.
How about selling change to your peers or your managers? I think you were just telling us about selling change to your teams. What are the keys to selling change that you want to your management or your peers?
Yeah,
inside a company.
Yeah, I think the key is, again, goes back to that, like, what's the goal, and being really clear on the building blocks to getting to that goal. If they can see step 1, 2, and 3 to getting to that end game, then they'll step along with you. And then when that first or second milestone happens, they really start to buy in. So it does take a little bit of time, and it does take consistency, and it does take, I go back to a famous PR guy from CBS, Gil Schwartz, used to say, like, just when you're sick and tired of hearing from me, you're finally breaking through. And so it's about repetition a little bit of those goals and those steps to get there. And then I think people really buy in. And look, and it's finding like-minded managers, right? I always had a great mentor, a guy named Neil Braun. He used to run NBC.
Sure. Interesting.
And he took me away and took me over to Stars back in the day. And
have you forgiven him?
No, there was a wonderful kickstart to me, not saying I had to be at the same company the whole time, like kicking into new places. And he was wonderful that way. And he's like, Mark, you don't have to be like me to be good, right? You can be totally different in how you approach it. And I try to live that philosophy with managers. It's not about executing the same way I would do it. It's just about having that shared goaling and step-by-step feature. Then otherwise, go at it the way you go at it. So I think that each manager has to develop their own way of getting their teams to really do the things that they need to do. But, I'm a big believer in giving people that space to be themselves. And once you can be your authentic self, you find, performance really does come through when you get to that phase.
So you've been in a number of companies. You've seen a number of different management styles, leadership styles. You've evolved. The industry's evolved. Do you see any change today in a lowering of tolerance for risk? And you said we'll make mistakes. We won't be perfect. Yeah. Do you see a change in the tolerance toward being imperfect, making mistakes?
I think what's so interesting about today is that the work culture has become, because of hybrid and remote, that there just almost has to be this trust that employees are executing on their time, not with you or whoever you is, right? The manager in those pieces. And so I think what that leads to, I don't know if it's risk tolerance. I think what it is sort of that the tolerance of the unknown, right? We are all okay believing that things are happening that we can't see, touch, or feel in the moment, and knowing that the results will come back, and that if the results don't come back, we'll diagnose why the results don't come back, and then make the right decision on how to make the results come back in a better way the next time or immediately. And I think that's a big change over the last 3 to 5 years, right? I mean, since the beginning of COVID, I think you just have to, I believe in running a flexible work environment and finding the right way to give employees that capability that also fits for your business. And some things need to be in person and some things don't. And so we really do strive, at least the places I've worked, to deliver on that for employees. But then we need that to be delivered back in sort of the execution of how things
Going back to the empathetic leadership, empathetic accountability. The accountability is something you can measure. Empathy, it's more difficult to measure. So when you have an employee who may not be empathetic, how do you lead that individual? How can you teach them to be empathetic?
There's coaching. I was a team sport athlete. I know some of you guys were too. And I'm a big believer that there is often improvement that can be had through coaching, but sometimes not, right? And that's when you have to find someone else. But I do believe that you can coach people to be better at the things that they need to do. And look, some people are born managers and some people are not. Right. Some people can be trained managers. Some people are not. I think it's really key to finding the right people for the right slots, right? I mean, I think, having graduated from being an executor to a strategist to a CEO, part of that is just being good at executing on finding the right people for the right slots. And, I really think that's not just CEO level, that's C-suite level everywhere. Like I find that it's really, are you a great hirer and then manager of those people? Because you're not really doing most of the doing at any of those C-suite level, those jobs.
Let's talk about OverDrive. You haven't been there very long,
yeah.
But it's a global organization,
Yes.
super global job, and Jack and I like to talk about cultures. Have you so far, because it's a global job and you're touching how many countries?
We are in 115 countries.
Just 115.
Yeah.
How many countries are there?
200 and something?
Okay.
270?
Okay. Yeah, right. It's only 250. Yeah, okay. So any interesting learnings about cultures so far? Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia. Take that any way you want about cultures and your learning so far.
Yeah, and I'm a little new at OverDrive, and Brightcove was a global company as well,
Okay.
my last company. And what I'll say is like there's wild differences in the cultures and how you have to execute in each of these places. I mean, like if you've ever been to Japan and know how much you need to bring your business card and hand it to everyone the right way to garner the respect you deserve, whereas the U.S. it's very different in Europe.
Anything that surprised you? Or you're too new at this one?
In the job, yeah, sure. There's some things that surprised me, but I would say that in culturally, I mean, I found like one of our largest customers at Brightcove was in Korea, in South Korea, and just the culture there and how technology they have isolated themselves to make sure that everything is built in that country, right? So they don't have Google and Amazon; they have Naver and Coupang. Right, they have their own versions of each of those technologies, and really understanding that like that market is going to operate that way and really cares. Whereas certain other markets are like, it's a free for all. Like have anybody you want in there and figure out how to do it. And so figuring out how to do business in each of those cultures is really unique. I think with OverDrive, the biggest thing for us is we are a marketplace between content providers and institutions. So which means we have to have relationships with both sides of that marketplace in each territory. So as much as we know the big 5 publishers in the US have really global reach, it's not full, right? There are publishers in each territory that really matter to that territory. So we have to have the unique content assets in each territory to deliver to those institutions. Otherwise, we don't really make a difference or the difference that we want to make. The great news is the technology we provide, the direct-to-consumer side, the Libby app and the Canopy app, those effectively work everywhere or most places, right? And so we can actually execute those on a really global scale. And so very optimistic about our growth opportunities outside the U.S. We have really good presence in the English-speaking territories and a strong presence in Germany and Singapore and a few other like core others. But there's a lot of opportunity out there for us to grow beyond where we are today.
When you talk about the opportunity, you've only been there a month.
Yeah.
But talk about what you've learned and what you're learning about educational systems, and how OverDrive fits into the educational markets.
Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to join a company that has a mission that I just feel like I can get behind.
That's nice.
Over the long run, right? We are here to promote reading and literacy and knowledge, across the globe, and enabling, public and private institutions to be able to buy and deliver a consumer experience that otherwise they wouldn't be able to do from major publishers and major providers of content. And the access to that for young people is absolutely massive. And I've seen that throughout my career. I'm on the board of an organization called The Door here in New York City, which is helping 12 to 21-year-olds with all the essential services they don't get from their parents or their school or other places. And
Such as?
We have a large healthcare clinic. We provide 2 meals a day, GED, college prep, lawyers to help with immigration status, and any bevy of wraparound services to help kids of that age thrive and really get launched. And then we also launched our own charter school about a decade ago called Broome Street Academy, which takes over 70% of its student population from at-risk homes, so foster kids or kids who have real issues. And we graduate a huge number, same as the Department of Education. And even though we take an at-risk population, and what I found is that like just being able to give those kids the right resources at the right time makes a huge difference. And when you read the stats of like less than half of Americans read a book last year, it's just really important to us as a company that we, enable people to have access to this type of content on a broad basis, especially, we're there for everybody, but especially it tweaks my interest when we can do it for young people.
Your grandmother would be very proud of you.
I think she would too.
Yeah.
Mark, one last question.
Please.
We were talking off air about you after selling Brightcove and then thinking about what you were going to do next. The checklist that you used, you rattled it off like it was nothing. I think it's really, really wise. Can you tell the listeners what were the things as you were looking for what was next, what were the things that you thought were important?
Look, I spent a large part of my career in the intersection of media and technology, and it's not like every company at that intersection had a really easy time of it in the last few years, right? No. So there was not necessarily, the things that I was really looking for was, is this company growing, right? Are they going after a growing proposition? Are they profitable, right? Can they survive in the mid to long term? Do you have great backing or investors, right? Public is different because public, you can have great backing without having a specifically great investor. In this case, I have a great investor in KKR as the major owner of OverDrive. And then lastly, is it a mission that you can get behind and really live? And I always give this advice to people when they think about a new job and they ask me, like, should I do this? And I've been lucky enough over the last couple of years to help a couple of CEOs who weren't CEOs become CEOs and find new jobs. I'm the chair of a company called ClearLink, where I hired a guy named Mark Larkin, who used to run CNET with me at CBS to be the CEO, and I helped Scott Levine find the CEO job at TouchTunes, which is a great company. And what I always say is, like, you got to find something that you can be engaged in, that when you get up in the morning and someone says, there's this dinner you got to go to with this person in your industry, or this thing you have to do for work, because it's work and it's not always going to be easy. So that if you can be super engaged when you get up every day about the things you're going to go do, that's absolutely key. And I think I found that in OverDrive.
We've heard that a few times. Go ahead, because I have a final. I've got my final. And you may have answered this, but go back to your days at Quist. What was
Hammerton Quist.
Hammerton Quist. Go back to your days there. What would you tell that person today?
I would tell him that. I would say, go find something you can really be engaged in. I made a pivot. I was in technology investment banking. I said, I don't think I want to be an investment banker. I think I want to be an operator. I went back to business school. I went to NYU Stern, and I focused in the entertainment, media, and technology program because I was like, I got to be somewhere close to content. That's what really excites me on a day-to-day basis. I thought it might be being a filmmaker. I went to film school when I was an undergrad for one semester. I was like, I might not be that great at this. This might not be my calling. I've produced a couple movies in my career, and as fun and awesome as that was, I realized I'm just like better at certain things, and I get more electrified by building teams, putting teams together, and operating businesses. And so I think I found sort of the right seats for myself in the last few years of like finding those type of leadership roles where I can really, help a team go from level A to level B and really make things happen.
Do you think going back to school during a career is still offering to young people today what it offered to you?
It's hard to tell. I think it is changing in an everlasting way. I still sit on the adjunct faculty at NYU. I've taught the class a few semesters called Digital Strategy. And I think that class was really valuable for the students I taught it to. At least I hope so. I got decent ratings. But but I don't know, and I think that's hard to tell. I think for each student it's different. I think it was very different for me. I needed the time to focus on a new part of on an industry that I really wanted to get into, and I took every internship anybody would give me. I worked at Cablevision and at Miramax, and I was like, doing whatever I could do to find experience in that realm, and even just for that, it was worth it. But the connections I made and some of the people are still. I met my wife. I met numerous colleagues that I have worked with over the decades, and so I find it to be incredibly valuable. I'm not sure everybody got the same thing out of it that I did, and I'm not sure they still do. So I think it's a very individual decision.
Marc, thanks so much for being our guest today. I think we're going to wrap it there.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Let's thank the listeners today. I hope you got a lot out of this conversation with a guy who's on the cutting edge and doing really great things, and something that is things that are jazzing them at the same time, which is really good. If you did learn today, I'll bet you did, please do go ahead and share it. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. And help us on this mission now with Marc to lead human, because in a world that machines and AI are certainly important, that we believe the real competitive advantage in business today is still going to come back to unleashing the human potential. And this has been Lead Human. Thank you much.
Thanks, guys. Great.